Hello and welcome. You're listening to Exposed Abortion in America, where we uncover the truth of the abortion industry. I'm your host, Eva Cooley, and in today's episode, we welcome Dr. Alveda King, niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King is here today to share with us her own personal story of abortion, how she was almost aborted in her mother's womb. Today, she is also going to tell us about the targeting of minority communities of the abortion industry. She will speak about the character of Margaret Sanger, and she will talk about her own organization called the Civil Rights for the Unborn. Dr. King continues her uncle's legacy of dreaming for equal rights for all people, including the unborn. So today on our podcast, we have Dr. Alveda King, who is the daughter of civil rights activist A.D. King and the niece of Martin Luther King Jr. She is an author, speaker, a former college professor, a former Georgia state legislator, and a pro-life advocate working to speak out for those who have no voice. And we're so grateful to have her on our podcast today. Dr. King, thank you so much for being here. And I'm wondering if you can just tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and what it is that you're most passionate about.
Thank you, and hello to the SBA community. God bless everyone. People often ask, what am I most passionate about? And I would say that that is my relationship with Jesus Christ and Holy Spirit. And of course, God is my Father. I am a Christian evangelist. A lot of people don't know that. I also hold a PhD, and I have accomplished many beautiful experiences in my life. So what am I most passionate about is glorifying God in the earth.
Wow, thank you so much for that answer. And I'm wondering if you can tell our listeners about your personal experiences with abortion. I know that you currently are a pro-life advocate. You speak out on behalf of the unborn. So could you tell us how you got into that field of working with the pro-life movement and your own personal experience with abortion?
Let me explain it this way, and I hope people understand it. Oh, your passion is fighting abortion. I said, I do fight abortion. Abortion takes away the human dignity of a human being in the womb. It is not fun to go out and give my own testimony about my own abortions and a miscarriage because of the abortions, but it always touches hearts and it always touches lives. So I'm always happy to share it. It's not my favorite thing to do, but it makes a difference. In 1950, my parents, Reverend A.D. King and my mother, Dr. Naomi Ruth Barber King, were engaged to be married. They were college students. They, at that time, dating was just going out with somebody that you loved and were attracted to or having fun with it. There was no sex involved in those experiences. That was called courting. They were courting and planning to get married. Her mother said, well, you're going to be married soon and you can go on a date. So when they went on the date, I was conceived, if you get that. So here my parents are, mom wanting to finish college. She's just starting and she's pregnant. There was an organization in town called the Birth Control League, I think it was back then. It became Planned Parenthood. And they said, well, there's so many things that can happen when you wait to have children. Come and see us. So they could not recommend an abortion for my mother because abortion was illegal in 1950, but they recommended that she have a DNC to explore her stomach and her reproductive health. So if she had done that, that would have been an abortion because I was in her womb. She went back to her mom. Her mom says, let's go talk to our pastor. Their pastor was Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Sr. He says, Nene, that was her nickname, Naomi. Nene, they're lying to you. That's not a lump of flesh. That's my granddaughter. I saw her in a dream 3 years ago. She has bright skin and bright red hair, and she's going to bless many people. That's an abortion. No. So my mother agreed with my grandfather. They were married before I was born. And so I was born with bright skin and bright red hair, and I let people today determine if I have blessed anybody. I believe God has used me. So anyway, all of that was a family secret for many, many years. But my mom would say things like, "Don't ruin this for me. You always ruin everything." I'm like, how did I ruin everything? What did I do? I did not find out that full testimony until my mother shared with Father Frank Pavone and Janet Morana, and they recorded her on their TV show explaining how my granddaddy rescued me from abortion. So I guess I would say I'm born to share my testimony, and I am so glad that it blesses others. Now, along with that, when my uncle, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., was killed in 1968, he was shot. My dad, his brother, in the same movement, like the Kennedy brothers. Then my dad was killed in 69. My grandma was shot playing the organ by a black man, by the way, in 1974. So we had a lot of trauma. I got married as a virgin, by the way, during that time, and I birthed a child. And then I ended up with two abortions in the rabid feminist movement and a miscarriage because of damage that was done to my body. All of this happened during that time period. So I was being formed and forged in the fire to be a pro life voice for America and the world. And all of these incidents were occurring. I did end up divorced. I almost aborted. So I birthed a child in 1970. 1971 or so, I had a DNC at a recommendation of a doctor. He knew I was pregnant, I didn't. And then in 1973, abortion became legal. I was pregnant again, and I chose an abortion because I was told it was a blob of tissue. My life was too inconvenient, and let's not waste my life with a pregnancy. And I believed it, unfortunately. And then after that, I had a miscarriage. So all of these things occurred, and I had not received Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I was going to a church. Uh, all the men in my family almost were preachers. The women were women of God, but I had not made a commitment to the Lord. In 1983, I dedicated my life to Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I repented of my sins, which include abortion, and I became a voice for life. One of the first questions I asked as a college professor by then, I had been a screen and stage actress, a state legislator, just doing all kinds of things. And I was a law, I was teaching business law in school. And I said, a woman has a right to choose what she does with her body. The baby's not her body. How can the dream survive if we murder our children? Morals and ethics today. Has America gone too far? And that was on the question of abortion. So for the next years, all the way to today, I would go out and do talks. I would give my own testimony that I just gave you. I would defend the babies in the womb, from the womb to the tomb and beyond, I call it now. So all of that is part of my personal testimony. Today, of course, I produce music and film and sing and still do a little acting and all of that type of thing. However, I will always be a defender of life from the womb to the tomb and beyond.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that personal testimony with us. And I know even though you go around and do lots of talks, you're a professional speaker, I'm sure it is difficult to be vulnerable and to rehash the details of these personal stories. So thank you so much for sharing that with our listeners today. And I
You're
know
welcome.
that it will bless them. You mentioned your uncle and you mentioned dreams that run in your family. And I was just hoping if you could comment on this quote that you have that I love. You've said, if the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is to live, our babies must live, our mothers must choose life. Can you tell us about how you see your dream of ending abortion as being similar to that of the dreams of your uncle?
I actually can explain that easily, and I always call what my grandfather saw in his dream of me 3 years before I was born a prophetic ultrasound. And so if we can accept that human dignity is for everyone, we're one blood and one human races. We're not separate races. There are different ethnicities. There are different ages. There are different issues as human beings that all human beings experience. But a common denominator is life. God gives us life. And people say, well, God made me this way. God wanted me to be this way or that way. God created us in the image and likeness of God in perfection. We are born into sin. And when we are born into sin, these issues attach themselves to us. And it can be for many, many generations. You hear about generational curses and things that happen to your mom or your dad. It's got to happen to you because it happened to them. But that is not God. That is not God's plan. And so God desires for us to prosper and be in good health, even as our souls prosper. And so I've always said, and people just don't get it, I was born this way. I was born that way. God must have wanted me. I said, be born again. Just to be born again. Be a new you. There's a better way. And I have been blessed to choose a better way myself. And so when I quote my uncle, life is the common denominator from conception. That is our common denominator.
That's a beautiful answer. Thank you so much. And I know that you've launched an initiative called Civil Rights for the Unborn. Can you tell us about that and what it is?
When I first went full time at an organization, Priests for Life, I'm still on the board today. We had African American outreach because I was very concerned during that time at the turn of the century, basically. And I would talk to Father Frank Pavone at the time. He was Reverend Pavone and Janet Morana, Georgette Forney, all of the folks there. And I said, well, even all of your pictures have Caucasian babies and Caucasian parents. What about the African American ethnicity? What about our community that's being targeted by abortion intentionally by Planned Parenthood and the abortion lobby? And so we did the research, and all of that turned out to be true. And then later, a few years later, the board and others, well, we don't want to make it just about African American outreach. What about what can we really do? And then I went back to my civil rights roots, civil rights for the unborn, and civil rights with life being a major civil rights issue. I believe, happen to believe that school choice is another one, but life is a civil right. It's a human right, human dignity. And so we changed from African American outreach to civil rights for the unborn. And that organization, and then my sister parent organization, Speak for Life, those all work together to care about life, and in every stage too, not just conception and in the womb, but for children, adults, the sick, the elderly, all people, regardless of ethnicity. People say, well, I'm gay and I was born gay. I said, well, you created an image and likeness of God. You were born all types of ways. Let's just talk about what it means to be born again.
Thank you so much for that answer. Now, you mentioned Planned Parenthood. Could you tell our listeners about how you've seen Planned Parenthood target minority communities?
I was targeted by Planned Parenthood myself. I had an African American doctor who was affiliated with Planned, and they were intentionally, most of his patients were Black, and they were intentionally telling us to be a credit to our race. We didn't need to keep having a lot of babies. And we were told that often in our community. I saw myself, I would go to various communities during this century, and there would be abortion mills on streets named after Martin Luther King Jr. And so, as I saw the targeting of my own community, and Abby Johnson took the lid off of all of that and admitted that that was discrimination and to kill more Black babies. Lila Rose did some research. My friend Dr. Day Gardner, the National Black Pro-Life Coalition, Ryan Baumberger, Catherine Davis, all of us. And we have worked with all of the pro-life organizations, including yours, to continue to expose this and every decade, every generation, every platform, because people will forget. So it'll come up, we'll uncover it, and then we think we've done our job. 10 years later, the same thing is back. Yeah.
Do you have any statistics or any research that you've done on the history of Planned Parenthood and its relationship to minority communities?
I would refer you to the organizations that are constantly updating this. The Restoration Project with Catherine Davis, Ryan Baumberger is another source, and the National Black Pro-Life Coalition. There are very current statistics that they change constantly. And so I try not to quote them, but I ask you to look for them.
Can you tell us anything about Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood?
Unfortunately, Margaret Sanger appears to have been a very damaged woman during her lifetime. Whatever scarred her, her traumas caused her to feel that abortion inevitably would be an answer. During her lifetime, abortion was illegal. So she promoted the Negro Project, and that was sterilization by tubal ligation for women and vasectomies for men and all other types of procedures that would minimize the Black population. And she felt as though she was being a credit to the Black race, Negro race, she called us. She said, colored people are like weeds, they need to be exterminated. We don't want that word to get out, so let's give things to their best and brightest. So she was behind a lot of awards and grants. They offered Martin Luther King Jr., my uncle, the Planned Parenthood Award. He didn't even attend the ceremony, didn't write the speech, didn't go. His wife went because she did support some of that. So unfortunately, Margaret Sanger was a racist. Admittedly, and Planned Parenthood finally admitted that as well. I would say she was a very misguided, traumatized person.
What would your message of hope be to women who think that abortion is the end of their story?
There's always hope and healing as long as we are breathing. We can love each other, we can share. And for me, my greatest hope is, of course, I'll see my children in heaven, the ones who've been aborted or miscarried. But there's always hope. There's always forgiveness. There is always healing. That is just a generational truth.
Dr. King, if you could say one thing to Planned Parenthood, what would it be?
If I could talk to Planned Parenthood, and I do, I talk to people who are still there, people who've been there, and I will just say there's a better way. There has to be a way to serve humanity without killing humanity. Let's find that together.
Now, Dr. King, you have done so much for the pro-life movement, and I'm hoping that you could talk to our listeners just a bit about some of the content that you've been able to produce.
Truth must be shared in every generation, decade, and on every platform. One of my favorite platforms, of course, I am on social media and I try to only do positive posting. And I have a YouTube channel with many, many music videos. One of my recent projects is called Old Freedom, and it's a playlist with 16 songs with music videos. And you'll see the pro life message throughout all of those. There are books and videos, and I am on social media.
That's wonderful. And just my final question for you today is what would your dream for the pro-life movement? What are you most hopeful to see for this movement in the next, let's say, decade?
I'm about to be 75 years old, and I'm so excited about that. 5 years from now, I'll be 80 and then 85. Pray I'm still here. My mom passed away when she was 92. And so, in every generation, every decade, and on every platform, truth must be told. Trinity Wicker comes to mind, and she's one of the young ladies that I mentor in a group called She Leads America. And when I talk to Trinity, her parents, had an abortion, and yet they married, and she has many siblings, and now she is a pro-life voice herself. In every generation, decade, and platform, as the voices continue to rise, telling the truth, speaking the truth in love, there's always going to be hope. So I'm really very excited. I'm excited to be speaking with you as a young woman. And so this is my joy that you are proclaiming these truths as well.
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful way to end our podcast episode. And here at SBA, we are just so grateful for you, Dr. King, for the countless ways that you have worked to serve in the pro-life movement. And thank you for blessing our listeners' ears today with your message of hope and by being vulnerable with us and just speaking truth to us. So thank you again for being willing to give up your time and join us. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you for listening to Exposed Abortion in America. Our mission is to give you, our listeners, the truth when it comes to exposing the abortion industry. Tune in next week to hear more about the secrets, horrors, and history of Planned Parenthood.